It's up. Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like first to apologize for my very tiny mathematical mistake. I, in fact, meant this event to be on April 18th, but because, as I told also my students, my brain works with numbers, so when it's confused with the names of the days, I actually lose the context. However, since it is the Easter day, but it's also the Passover, it is the almost mid of Ramadan, and many other holidays. People are actually celebrating their holidays in peace. And since we are speaking about Mosul, in fact, during these days, I am happy to see that the city is enjoying also a peaceful celebration of their holidays, no matter what religion or ethnic group they are. And that is actually thanks to the reconstruction and recovery of the city itself, the resilience of the people, but in fact, the recovery of the cultural heritage, which is the subject of our discussion this evening, and specifically revive the spirit of Mosul, with focus on the historic houses that have been reconstructed and still under reconstruction by UNESCO. This evening, I am joined by Junaid Surush Wali, who is the director of the Culture Office of UNESCO Iraq. We also have Elise Lafrouji, a student at Sciences Po studying cultural heritage. We have from the University of Birmingham, Alistair Kramer, and we have also from the University of Bath, Alistair Nicol. The three students have done research on the cultural heritage, but also on the Revive the Spirit of Mosul from different perspectives. And we will hear from them more about their conclusions, recommendations, and their perspective of such initiative. I would like first to invite Junaid to take the floor and introduce to us what is Revive the Spirit of Mosul? What is the value of these houses that you are reconstructing?
I think your mic's muted.
Unmute. Yes. Good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be a part of this exciting event tonight. And thank you, dear Omar, for having me. Yes, I would like to do a brief introduction to UNESCO's Revive the Spirit of Mosul flagship initiative. So probably to take 5-10 minutes, so please bear with me. As you know, Mosul, the second largest city in Iraq, was under Islamic State control for 3 years, from 2014 until 2017. After the liberation, almost 80% of the old city of Mosul has been destroyed. This demonstrates the catastrophic combined effect of deliberate and collateral destruction as a result of the conflict. Mosul is the capital of the region of Nineveh. As you know, ancient mosques, churches, and synagogues, historic houses embellishing the city testify to its glorious story, rich in architecture, culture, and art, a symbol of coexistence and cultural diversity. Almost all of that was gone with the Daesh invasion and subsequent battles. In February 2018, a conference for the reconstruction of Iraq was held in Kuwait. The international community announced a strong mobilization for the rehabilitation of the country's infrastructure. UNESCO stood up to uphold the human dimension. The Director General of UNESCO, Riazuleh, declared, I quote, "Reconstruction will succeed and Iraq will regain its influence only if the human dimension is given priority. Education and culture, are the key elements. They are forces of unity and reconciliation. End quote. The first to respond to the call of UNESCO to assist was the United Arab Emirates, which is currently financing the construction of the two historic landmarks of Mosul, Al-Nouri Mosque and Al-Adaba Minaret, as well as of Al-Saha and Al-Tahira churches. The European Union also joined the Mosul reconstruction efforts with a project of rehabilitating some 124 historic houses of residents in the old city of Mosul and support the revival of cultural life and education. Other UNESCO member countries also offered help, each supporting another rehabilitation project or scope of intervention within the initiative, such as Canada, France, government of Flanders, Germany, Italy, Hungary, Japan, Lithuania, Netherlands, South Korea, and Sweden. We are very thankful, of course, to these countries for their support so far, and we hope that more funding and more countries will join UNESCO's Revive the Spirit of Mosul initiative soon. Revive the Spirit of Mosul is UNESCO's most, we can say, ambitious reconstruction campaign in recent decades. It's based on three pillars: cultural heritage rehabilitation, support for education, and as the third pillar, cultural life. All these are essential drivers for the recovery of Mosul. Reviving the spirit of Mosul is not only about reconstruction heritage sites, it is about empowering the population as agents of change involved in the process of rehabilitating, rebuilding their city through culture and education. It's with a strong message of hope and resistance to Iraq and to the world, a message that an inclusive, cohesive, and equitable society is the future that Iraqis deserve. UNESCO's rebuilding the iconic Al-Nouri Mosque and its Adaba Minaret, Al-Saha, Notre-Dame de l'Or Convent, and Al-Tahira Church. More than 124 houses, heritage houses, as well as the Agawat Mosque, another historic landmark, as well as Ikhlas School in the old city, Ikhlas School being the first child-friendly school in Mosul, while also upgrading its infrastructure along two heritage trails. It was essential to restore the emblematic landscape and monuments of this 1,000-year-old city, devastated by violence and occupation. In the field of culture, UNESCO opened a culture and creative space and at this station, our partners venue, and relaunch culture festivals in reading, music performances, including the recent event and festival we organized, music festival, Mosul Traditional Music Festival, that took place from 24th to 27th of March. And it was first of its kind since the liberation, bringing together more than 10 Iraqi and 4 European music groups. We also trained 20 students on filmmaking who made 8 fantastic short movies that will be soon displayed to broader public. Rehabilitation is not only of our historic buildings, of course, I'm talking about, is not only about reconstructing stones or monuments, which are of course important, but really about bringing back life into the city. It's about social cohesion and the strong link that had persisted through the long history of Mosul between culture and everyday life. Reviving the spirit of Mosul also means bringing the old city back to life by allowing residents to return in their homes that were destroyed during the war. As we were talking about this earlier, you mentioning Omar, more than, as of today, more than 40 restored heritage houses in the old city of Mosul have been recently handed over to their original owners. They're quite happy and enthusiastic about the handover and the way they want to now use their houses. This EU financed project doesn't only address the rehabilitation of these ancient houses to the way they were before Daesh took over the city, but much more. The residents will get their beautiful old homes back, repaired, and with running water and connected to the power grid, with their streets paved and refurbished with brand new public light. 70 families have already came back to live in their houses in the old city, where amazingly, and it's very touching, where the voices of children can once again be heard, and life is gradually coming back actually to the old city. The rehabilitation and reconstruction of 80 additional houses have started in September last year and progressing well. All these work are done using, of course, traditional techniques and materials to preserve the identity of the old town, because we are also intervening on a very valuable historic city. A final important point is about this initiative is the training that the Unesco initiative offers the people of Mosul, and the job opportunity is it will create or already created. 3,152, if I remember well, local jobs have been so far created by this UNESCO initiative. UNESCO has teamed up with the University of Mosul and with other institutions such as Dolsa to create a professional formation programs, and on all levels, including strengthening craftsmanship and establishing frameworks for technical and vocational education. 1,315 young people have been graduated from technical vocational education and training programs as part of educational program that the initiative comprises. All this, of course, to revive Mosul's centuries-old tradition of integrating arts and culture into the vibrant city life that Omar and most of you know quite well. Rebuilding these monuments and these buildings means reviving the very spirit of the city. It means restoring residents' access to their history, to a part of their identity, an ancient history of brilliant culture and religious diversity. I think to conclude, I would say that this is UNESCO's very reason d'être, raison d'être, striving for peace in the mind, because as UNESCO's constitution reminds us, since wars begin in the mind of man, it is in the minds of man that the defense of peace must be reconstructed. End of quote. Thank you.
Thank you, Junaid. This is a fascinating brief of the situation in Mosul and the recovery of its cultural heritage. In fact, before we start the discussion, let me just put on the video that will give more context into the reconstruction of Mosul.
Yes, thank you very much.
أنا مظهر محمد محمود أبو عمر، عمري 60 سنة، أشتغل نجار غضاً عن جد يعني أنا بقيت على مود بيتي ودكاني وهذه، أنا أخشى دكاني قدام عيني قامت تروح. والله اللي صار يعني أنا ما كنت شفته هاك الشيء أبد، يعني شيء فظيع يعني شيء مفزع. يعني هالعمليات اللي صارت والقصف والدواعش وكله والجوع والعطش كله اجتمع علينا. طبعا هي الناس اللي بقت أثناء العمليات بقت معزة ببيوتها. يعني قلت أنا بيتي كنت عتبينه وبيتي كعيش بينه صار سنين أبا عن جد.
Followed up very closely with our colleagues from Unesco on this project over the past almost 3 years, and now coming here and seeing with my own eyes the progress, the houses, how to what an extent they have been rebuilt with such a great attention to every detail, with such a great attention to preserving the original practices when it comes to alabaster, when it comes to the woodworks, when it comes to the ironworks. It's very important for us as European Union to also combine heritage preservation with job creation and seeing people working on these sites that have been part of TVET programs, be it school TVET, be it higher education TVET, be it part of the collaboration with ICROM. It is really impressive.
طبعا شعور جدا عظيم بأن أكون أحد المتدربين داخل هذا المشروع. هذا المشروع له قيمة تاريخية وذاتية لأهل الموصل.
تعلمت شغلات كثيرة من حيث التأسيس، مجموعة أخرى فرش، صبغ، لبخ، مجاري، يعني كلها أنه إعادة بناء، نساهم أنه نرجع مدينتنا مثل قبل وأحسن. الخراب اللي صار نرجعها أحسن من قبل. وعنصر ثاني أنه نحن كمادة استفادنا منها جدا بمساعدة الأهل في فتح مشروع حتى لو صغير جدا.
جيت منظمة اليونسكو عمر البيوت مالنا، صارت البيوت مالنا يعني أحسن من قبل نقول 100%. مشروع خدم المنطقة، حتى الشوارع، حياة يعني هذا البيت عندنا حياتنا.
This is a fascinating video, and reflecting on this, Elise, you have been studying cultural heritage diplomacy and the role it plays in establishing a better future, and the role it played in the past. Actually, from your own perspective, how do you evaluate such kind of a project, given that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have seen reconstruction projects working on the recovery of heritage sites, but we rarely see that those sites are actually inhabited and populated by people. People are living there. This is a unique example that I am witnessing here. Yes, I am from Mosul, but I didn't have that much information that actually people are returning to those houses, taking back their lives, but at the same time recognizing the cultural value of their space.
Yes. Thank you, Omar. I think it really sum up what's the most interesting in this program is how the work UNESCO's as well as the international community worked with the people to create an inclusive space for local communities in a project. It's such an international project, I mean. And from my perspective, as you said, I've studied cultural diplomacy, but I tended first to have a very limited conception of heritage protection, maybe very basic, and studying and using Mosul's initiative as a case study really enables me to better grasp these interactions and interconnection between local communities and their heritage, actually. And it really shows how UNESCO's is working with its program to foster a careful and continuous engagement with local people to really succeed with its program. And what's happening in Mosul, I think, is a perfect example of how conservation of heritage, of culture in general, as well as the connected peace building practices, such as you said, capacity building, social cohesion, practices in general, are all intrinsically linked with the engagement of the local actors, who will then shape, if not lead, the reconstruction process. And as myself, I'm a political science student, but I also want to work in the cultural field. I think it is truly relevant to study such an initiative and like tonight to create discussion about Mosul and this initiative, because of course it's a major demonstration of how diplomacy and our culture are linked, and our culture is becoming a field of diplomacy and international relation, but also it puts Mosul on a global scale, as well as focusing on its people like at the local scale, is also put Mosul on a global perspective, and somehow shows to the world, to the international community, that investing in culture, co-creating international program with local communities is actually catalyzing a positive impact on community and economy. We talked about creating jobs, also rehabilitating a city, its economy, its creative life also. I mean, Mosul has also a university, I believe, so it's also about that. And when we focus on what's doing the UNESCO concerning education program, and also what's happening in Mosul, you just realize how the rehabilitation, like houses, but also Mosul's museums, the festival. I think you mentioned the station in Mosul at the creative space. Also, we come to realize how the promotion of arts and culture in support of education, social cohesion, and pluralism must be at the forefront of such international project, linked, of course, to peace building and recovery effort to promote human rights. But I mean, it really is a good case study for international project, especially if you're working or studying, like me, diplomacy and international relations. So that's probably the main take I have on the initiative right now, but also, and I want to leave time to the other speakers, but can I ask questions to Mr. Saroush Wali, of course?
Sure.
Super. I mean, I've only looked at the initiative from a very distant lens, from a student in 2022, but my question would be focused on the first steps on your work with this initiative. I mean, how did UNESCO manage to work with so many different international bodies, nation organizations, like national delegation, for instance, while working with the Iraqi government and people in Mosul, so that the initiative can be with and for the people of Mosul? And if I can add a second question, it would be about what would be the biggest challenge you faced during this initiative as the head of culture of UNESCO Iraq? Thank you very much. You're mute. You're still mute.
Yes, I'm on mute now. Yes, thank you for the question. Very briefly, I think, of course, the big idea came from our Director General, and she was actually the initiator of this idea, revival the spirit of Mosul with the pillars that I explained. But I think an important aspect of this project was also that UNESCO wanted to, and as usual does actually, putting local communities at the heart of our projects, and in this case, at the heart of the reconstruction. process, and as part of UNESCO's mandate and the field of education, culture, freedom of expression, of course, also sciences and human sciences, it was very important to combine and bring together all these expertise together to the service of reconstruction and rehabilitation, and basically revival of the spirit of Mosul. This was a very good idea, I would say, and there was very interesting buy-in from the beginning by first the beneficiaries, the Iraqi authorities, the local community naturally, and of course more and more by different donors from international community, which was very, very positive. And we hope that this would continue in the coming years as well, because now we see actually the very positive results and impact, and also the value added of such projects on the ground, when of course it's run by UNESCO with this approach that we had. Probably linking to what you are mentioning, it's also very important to always keep this direct and regular communication also with the beneficiaries. And it's also a key aspect of UNESCO's implementation strategy. For instance, when we were preparing the design for Al-Nuri Mosque or the houses, actually, or specifically the houses, I can mention that for example, the example of the establishment of a joint technical committee comprising, in case of houses, comprising owners, city municipality, governorate, and the State Board of Antiquities in charge of the heritage houses and buildings. All this, their representative plus UNESCO and UNESCO's mainly local engineers. They have been all involved from the selection phase of the houses to the survey of the houses, the assessment of the need of the owners, to rehabilitation of or reconstruction design phase until the end of implementation of the works. This open, I think, and regular and constant, I would say, also communication to some extent with the local stakeholders and beneficiaries, and mainly the final users is proving to be very useful, not only for the successful implementation of the work, but also for raising awareness about the very essence of the initiative and its importance. To the extent that during some of our site visits with our partners and donors, we are witnessing regularly the visit of Moslawi community representatives coming to us, joining us during the visit, and our partners, and congratulating us and thanking us for the works achieved, and ask, of course, for continued support, as I said, realize now the positive impact and the added value of the projects, and such a comprehensive project managed by UNESCO. Now, I would say that this holistic approach of UNESCO was also a little bit part of its challenge, because it brings up together lots of entities together, but we managed to have this as, for the example of the example I give you about, for instance, the houses rehabilitation. We have a steering committee at a higher level, at governmental level mainly, including also the donor. And then we have also a technical level, a joint technical committee, where we have a high and very good representation of our Iraqi partners who are involved and supporting us and providing advice and guiding us in each step of the work and advancement of the project.
Thank you, Alistair the fifth. Sorry, Alistair Nicole. Because we have two Alistairs here. Everything is mentioned here is very important. However, we are still talking from the cultural heritage perspective, which is also crucial and very important to the recovery of lives. But let's take it a little bit toward the restoration of communities and the meaning of their lives. Everything plays an important role, but all of this will only make sense when the people feel that their life, their normal life, their daily life is actually functional. You yourself, you have, besides studying the impact of the terrorism on the urban space, but also you have witnessed firsthand devastating events. How do you see the recovery of Mosul is interacting with, at the same time, with the recovery of its cultural heritage? How does this impact the restoration of a trust among communities? And the biggest question, can communities actually heal from this, from these events?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. First off, I want to just go over what cultural heritage is for people that might not be quite as familiar with the idea. So to take the British Council, which does quite a lot of cultural heritage work, they say that it means many things, from the built environment through to cultural traditions like music and language. It also includes artwork, manuscripts, monuments, archaeological sites, oral traditions, festivals, the performing arts, traditional crafts. So it's fair to say that cultural heritage involves quite a lot of things. And as I see it, culture, I mean, the word culture, it kind of means that which cultivates. I hope you can see the connection between the words. Culture cultivates. So it's about cultivating certain actions, encouraging specific values. So I think that cultural heritage, just to set things straight, is almost the artifacts that have been passed down, the intangible, like music and dialects, as well as more tangible cultural heritage like buildings and paintings. So to go to your question, Omar, is how is that relevant to stitching together various communities? And first off, what's the difference between having various communities that happen to live in a roughly similar area and having one overarching community? And I'm not sure if we've mentioned this yet, but Mosul's name in Arabic, for those not familiar, means linking point or crossroads. And I think that's pretty well reflected in the various communities that are in Mosul. So it's a city that's historically made up of Jews, Christians, Sunnis, Shia, Yazidi, Assyrians. It's a place that is kind of inherently multicultural. So how do you stitch these different communities, these different faiths, these different ethnicities? How do you stitch them together? And I think the first point that I want to look at is the physical spaces that are involved with that. So in relation to cultural heritage, you have the intangible, so like music and stuff, but also the tangible. And I want to start with the tangible, the physical spaces that make up cultural heritage. And I think you did this work, Omar, but one of the most important aspects to Mosul as a physical space is its markets, because historically, these communities have been fairly segregated. You know, Jews tended to live with the Jews, Christians tended to live with the Christians, but it was in the market spaces that these different ethnicities, these different religious faiths, they came together for commerce, for trade, and that's also where they got to know each other. It's where they talked, it's where they became friends, it's where they realized who their neighbors were. So these physical spaces are really important. And one of the many tragic things that happened during ISIS's occupation, as well as the retake by the coalition, was that a lot of these physical spaces were either changed or outright destroyed. So these physical spaces for these different communities to come together is kind of lost. And I think a really interesting example of that was with the wool market, because you have the people that live outside of the city, the shepherds, the agriculturalists, they'd come into the city to sell their produce, to sell their wool and whatnot. But then when that was destroyed, they had no reason to go in. And so you kind of revert to having many communities that are living in the same area, but no overarching identity. And one of the work that Unesco and as well as local residents do is repairing, rebuilding these market spaces so that people can get to see each other again, that they have a reason to go out, and then you build these connections and build these kind of neighborly relations all over again. And I think to go to more kind of specific cultural heritage, it's interesting to look at cultural spaces like mosques and churches, because sometimes they're seen as separating communities. You know, a mosque is built for Muslims. It's built with the intention of of helping a specific community at the exclusion of others. You know, a church is built for Christians, not for Jews or Muslims. And yet, I think if you take it as a broad picture, these different cultural sites, they sort of create a mosaic for the city. Sure, if there's one church out of context, we can say that that's a Christian site. But if you're walking down a street, or if you're walking around the city and you see there's a church over here, a synagogue over there, a mosque on this corner, then suddenly it becomes not just something of faith, but it becomes something for the city. It becomes part of Mosloi identity. And I think a really interesting example of that that UNESCO helped to rebuild was I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but the Al-Sar Church, because despite the fact that it's a church, it's obviously there for Christians, it had a school attached to it, and Moslawis from all walks of life would attend that school and have graduated. So again, we see how cultural heritage is stitching together these communities so that this church becomes not just something for Christians, but something for everybody in the neighborhood. So recreating these physical spaces, the churches, the mosques, the parks, the markets, allows a literal space for these communities to come together. And I also want to take this a little bit a step further in terms of bringing it back to daily life, not just talking about cultural heritage and how lovely it is, but how does it help the people on the ground? How does it affect people's real lives? And I think one of the key things to say is how it not just brings these communities together, but it also makes the city or the overarching community more resilient. So, for example, research shows that it is generally younger people that are more likely to get radicalized, and specifically young men. But with a number of these projects that come in with UNESCO's Revival Initiative, they're getting young people involved to rebuild and create the spaces again. So, for example, the EU, they helped to contribute to the revival of the old city in Mosul through the UNESCO initiative. And one of their goals was to get in 1,500 young people, 1,500 young people brought in, trained up as workers, as semi-skilled and non-skilled laborers, so that they're the ones building their own city. They're not flying in people from America or the UK. They're bringing in or they're training up the locals, so that you've now got the situation where instead of 1,500 foreign workers, it's 1,500 young people that are stakeholders in their city. 1,500 young people that are literally building the city that they're living in, 1,500 young people to care about their city and have the skills to repair it. And I think by doing this, you're recovering real life. They've got the skills, they can take that into future jobs. They also care for their community. And I think that's the key point. So to sum up what I've been saying, the revival of Mosul is creating physical spaces that allow for different communities to come together and mingle again. And they allow room for culture to flourish, identities to be rebuilt, and they create stakeholders out of the citizens of the city. So that's my answer.
Amazing presentation, Alistair. Thank you so much. Alistair, the second, you have also you have done a research on the initiative itself, but you also have the two different perspectives. The one that the impact of terrorism on urban space, and on the other hand, the recovery of that space, the change that might happen. But just to add to what Alistair V said, in fact, what makes also once again Mosul unique in its structure of the urban design is that actually those religious spaces are established within the commercial space. Therefore, the recovery of a Nuri mosque, which was originally built and then created all the markets we can see today. The same with the Notre Dame de l'Or de Mosul, the Sa'a Church, the other churches. They all also function as not only religious but social spaces, helping the commercial space to grow and to continue, which plays a very important role now that it is coming back to life. Therefore, it is bringing back with it whoever have been living there, but also the carpenters, as you have seen in the video, because you need also craftsmen, you need people who are specialized in every small element in the recovery of the city. The floor is yours, Alistair, the second.
No, I completely agree. So a lot of the research I conducted for the paper was to do with UNESCO's TV ET scheme, regarding getting people whose livelihoods were completely destroyed by the IS occupation, getting them back on their feet, equipping them with the skills to help rebuild the community. And one thing I was really impressed with was the rebuilding of the community for the religious spaces. It was a completely multicultural approach, which would have added to the social cohesion of the city. And one thing I found really impressive with the UNESCO, with the Revive the Spirit of Mosul initiative, was the applicability of skills that individuals would pick up from UNESCO's training and that they could add into the future. For example, as Junaid mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I think it was 1,315 people have benefited from this TIVET scheme. And I think I've just found it so fascinating that it's not just the city of Mosul that will benefit from the scheme. The individuals who have gone through the scheme will be able to help with the transition and the rebuilding and the restoration of other cities impacted throughout Iraq after the demolition that IS posed to them. So yeah. And another question I wanted to add, if I could ask Junaid a question. What conditions do you think are needed for the progress that has been made under the Revive the Spirit of Mosul initiative? What conditions do you think needs to be made at a domestic level in Iraq for this to be sustainable?
Very good question. I think that stability and political stability is key, of course. But as you also mentioned, the resources are there actually. Now through this project, if I can take again this project and then as an example, and mainly the component of rehabilitation of historic houses and upgrading of the infrastructure of the old city, and support to culture life and culture creative industries. I didn't mention this into detail, but if you want, I can probably also give you some additional information on that. But all this together, we have so far created 2,100 local jobs. Actually, local jobs mean created for Moslawis and Iraqis within this component funded by the EU, and then globally 3,154 since the creation of an implementation of the initiative, combining and bringing together different projects. Now, this also brings, of course, immense experience on the rehabilitation of historic buildings, their restoration, all the preventive measures to be taken, and all the process which is linked to the restoration of a historic building, should it be a house or a landmark like Hadaba Minaret or Al-Tahira Church of Al-Nuri Mosque. On the other hand, we also built the capacity of, as you also recalled, more than 1,300 young people through different program of technical and vocational education training, mainly focusing, of course, on the construction trades. But also we built the capacity of 500, around 600 apprentices, whom we have provided with on-job training on the trades related to culture-related rehabilitation, such as alabaster restoration work, woodwork, traditional plastering, and so on and so forth. Now, we are also working on the training of a dozen of Iraqi professionals in the field of cultural heritage conservation and management, as well as 70 additional skilled workers in traditional handicrafts used in Mosul. And this is in partnership with our partner ICROM. Now, we also trained more than 50,000 people who participated in our different awareness raising activities and campaign. Now, I would say that all the ingredients is there. I believe that all the best practices used and generated through the implementation of this initiative of UNESCO are there, and they are very valuable assets that can be used by Iraqi authorities and donors communities, and to continue the support. Of course, funding is a key issue. We are looking forward actually, and UNESCO, of course, is striving to work side by side with the Iraqi authorities, but as well as with the donor community to achieve, of course, even greater results. But at this stage, I would say that we are bringing know-how, some part of which has been disappeared, unfortunately, because of the conflict and displacement. But we regain the know-how gradually. We bringing new techniques, we bringing the best practices in terms of conservation restoration available. I think now the capacity is there with the Iraqis and Moslawis, and then we need probably some political will and financial support also to implement and to expand further the zone of intervention, and mainly when it comes to the cultural heritage areas, mainly the area of Maidan, which has been dramatically damaged during the conflict. I hope I responded somehow to your question.
Eloquently, thank you. If I will not take more time, I promise. We will finish very soon. But if I may go back to the global perspective, to the three mosquitoes, to the three speakers, what should we do as people of Mosul, as UNESCO, to make the initiative that's happening? It is in the making. Yes, it's being researched, but it's also in the making. What should we do more to get more global attention to this initiative? I will start with Elise.
I think what's exactly we are doing tonight, which is creating a place of discussion about the initiative with different, I mean, we're coming from different universities and even different countries. So I think it's a very interesting thing to do. I guess maybe try to connect with the different programs that are already working towards maybe not cultural diplomacy, but also cultural protection. I mean, one of my biggest goals for next year would be to invite you actually to speak with Sciences Po scholars, to speak about cultural recovery in Iraq, and also to speak about protection of heritage with specialists. So, I mean, we have this goal with Omar, and I guess, and I hope we will do it next year, but I think it's a good opportunity. Well, creating discussion, of course, and I mean, Mosul Eye is a very important platform with an international broader perspective. And I mean, we are in the era of new technology, so having a presence on social media, Mosul Eye is a good example of that, I guess. And also UNESCO Iraq, I know they have like presence on social media, and I think it's a really important thing to be more invested in that, and to connect with scholars and participating in international programs. And I think UNESCO is a good platform for that as well.
Thank you.
Maybe they have also all.
Yeah, thank you. And I accept the invitation for the next year. Alistair, the second.
No, a lot of my thoughts are very similar to Elise's. I would argue, especially, so I was very fascinated in general by the entire conflict with IS and Mosul and the years after. One thing I've recognized since studying this was that there's been a very minimal presence. This is from a very British standpoint, in the British media. I've very rarely seen an article or evidence or like just actual awareness of the initiative, and for an initiative of such a big scale, of such huge importance. I think it's vastly important to, as Adu said, expand the network that the initiative has on social media, and this is very good with the Mosul Eye. I think And it goes back to Sinead's point about sustaining the funding, keeping the funding going. I think promoting the initiative further on social media, further in other countries in the world, to get the average reader of the news more aware about what's going on in Mosul will really be beneficial to keep this program running, and making more people aware of not just Mosul, but in terms of how cultural heritage can be used to help as a form of diplomacy and a form of social cohesion in places where they have experienced conflict in the past. So yeah, to sum up, I think enhancing the presence on social media and enhancing the marketing of the initiative so far would be what I would think would be the best policies to go into in the future.
Thank you. Alistair, the fifth.
Yeah, it's hard to follow up on that. There's not too much more to add, but I think something that's worth commenting is I think the revival initiative that's going on in Mosul, I think it can be a microcosm for the wider region of both Iraq and the Middle East. I mean, I'm sure Alistair would agree, but as someone from the West and the UK specifically, if you were to go down to the pub and ask, the average Joe what they think of the Middle East, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Generally, it's not going to sound great, but it's going to be, deserts, camels, and terrorism. It's not the look of the Middle East so far isn't great. And I think what's so wonderful about this revival initiative is that it starts to change that narrative. Instead of being a place of conflict and war-torn civilians and whatnot, it gets to be somewhere else. It's a place of, especially Mosul specifically, it's a place of multiculturalism, like we were saying before. It's a place of ancient civilizations, beautiful architecture. And I think that just continuing to promote it, continuing to get the message out there, connecting with the right people, connecting with journalists and the right people on social media and whatnot, and just being consistent with it, keeping it up, showing that this isn't just a one-time, we did well for a while and then it fades away, just having the consistency and then just slowly chipping away at that image that the Middle East has. I think Mosul gets to be a microcosm for what, the potential for the rest of the region of being this place of great heritage, of ancient history and beautiful architecture. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Alistair. Junaid, with your you are with the people, you go there on site, and you have here the three speakers speak about this. How can we transmit the global view, the global perspective to the people who are benefiting from the project, who are living all of this, to show them that what you are doing matters, not only locally, but also globally? How can we create this connection?
Very good point. I have to say, most of you actually, Elise, Astaire, and both of them, they mentioned very relevant points on the way we can probably further promote the initiative and raise awareness about this. And I would say it's very gratifying for us, UNESCO, to see that very young students taking this initiative as a kind of case study and further discussing this and studying this. I think it's already shows its success actually somehow, and of course probably few months later we'll be having more successes or probably also more challenges, but it's anyway, this is a very good start and a very good approach. Now from the ground side, I have to say people they're really fantastic in Mosul, and they're really very happy. I mean, every last 2 weeks before, we handed over another 12 houses to their owners. Now, when we give them the key within a symbolic gesture, because this is their house, sometimes they're so much moved because the way the house was before, probably the alabasters, the windows that have been painted, they couldn't probably recognize even some of the architecture features and the very important work of the alabasters and some of the windows and architecture elements. They see this, they see how things can be further improved. they're very much moved, of course, and then they are very happy to show this example, and they are participating with us in some community events and also awareness raising. I think these, as I was mentioning in the beginning, we are using actually through this project, Moslawis, people from Mosul, Iraqis as agents of changes. They are basically rehabilitating their houses, and they are the transformation factors actually, or agents and for a better future. So we count a lot on them. They are expecting a lot also in terms of mainly funding from Unesco and also from our partners. As I mentioned, every single time I'm going there, I'm meeting one or two more additional owners asking support. There's lots of needs, and as also Lastir was also mentioning, is that we have to keep consistency within this kind of successful approaches, and then we should not probably abruptly cut the funding, because there's still lots to do, and then I'm hoping and very much that also Iraqi government and authorities also step in, also in terms of funding, and work on the rehabilitation of the historic buildings and reconstruction of Mosul. So in sum, I would say the feelings from the ground are very positive. The feedbacks are very positive. But of course, there's lots of work still to be done. As I mentioned, 80% of the old city, only the old city that you can see from Google Map has been destroyed. So we are still recovering, but still a big part of the city and heritage assets are still have to be recovered and rehabilitated for future generation. And this is, of course, UNESCO's work, and we will be not sparing any efforts to do more, of course, with the funding we will get, and we will get, inshallah, soon more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Junaid. Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Alistair the second, Alistair the fifth. As Alistair the fifth told me, people are celebrating the resurrection. We are also celebrating the resurrection of culture, the resurrection of peace. I would like to say once again, happy Ramadan, happy Easter, happy Passover to all those who are observing and celebrating these holidays. There is only one way forward, is to recognize the value of what we have, to live together, and to realize the importance of working together, because we don't want to see another destruction. People are working on the recovery of their lives. We have to protect them, and we have to give them more reasons to continue this life. Thank you, Junaid, and thanks to UNESCO for its great initiative. We have discussed this initiative at length at Sciences Po. We will keep discussing it, and we will wait from UNESCO to send a big offer of internships so we can give it to our students. Thank you so much.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Omar, and thank you all for your participation on behalf of UNESCO. Thank you also for organizing this event. I think this is a very good way to raise awareness about the great job we are doing all together. UNESCO is not alone, and we do it together. And thank you very much also. Happy to be with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, all of you. And thanks to the attendees who attended despite the terrible mistake I made of making the event on 17th of April. Bye.